The Grand Hall of the United Earth Embassy sparkled under crystal chandeliers as James Anderson straightened his diplomatic uniform. At 42, with graying temples and steady brown eyes, he represented humanity's best chance at peaceful first contact with the stellar empire. The massive doors swung open, revealing Queen Ulta of the Empire. She towered over the human delegates at 8 feet tall, her silvery skin catching the light like polished metal. Her 4 eyes, deep purple in color, scanned the room with regal authority. Unlike the other members of her species, who wore elaborate mechanical suits, she moved with natural grace in a flowing garment that seemed made of liquid starlight. "Welcome to Earth, Your Majesty," James said, performing the traditional greeting gesture they had been taught. His hand moved in a spiral pattern over his chest, matching the Empire's custom. The Queen's upper eyes narrowed while the lower ones widened, an expression of interest among her kind. "Ambassador Anderson, your reputation precedes you." Her voice carried a musical quality that the translation devices couldn't quite filter out. As the formal introductions proceeded, James noticed how the Queen's guards kept their distance from the humans, their posture suggesting barely concealed disgust. It was no secret that the Empire viewed humanity as primitive. After all, humans had only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago, while the Empire had ruled the stars for millennia. The diplomatic ball that followed was a careful dance of politics and protocol. Other alien representatives from the Empire's court watched the humans like scientists observing specimens in a lab. James kept his diplomatic smile firmly in place, even as he heard whispers comparing humans to clever animals and useful primitives. Queen Ulta, however, showed unexpected interest in human customs. She requested demonstrations of earth dances, asked about human music, and even attempted to eat human food, something that shocked her own courtiers. Later in the evening, James found himself alone with the Queen in one of the embassy's garden terraces. The 2 moons cast different colored lights across the carefully maintained earth plants. "Your species intrigues me, Ambassador," Ulta said, her 4 eyes focused entirely on him. "You are so young, yet you've survived challenges that destroyed civilizations far more advanced than yours." James chose his words carefully. "We've had to adapt to survive, Your Majesty. Humanity's greatest strength is our ability to face adversity and grow stronger from it." Indeed, the Queen moved closer, her height casting him in shadow. "Did you know that my species has not evolved in over 10,000 years? We achieved biological perfection, or so we thought, and then we simply stopped." The conversation was veering into dangerous territory. James had been briefed about the Empire's obsession with genetic purity and their pride in their unchanging nature. "Change isn't always necessary for success, Your Majesty. But without change, there can be no adaptation." Ulta's upper eyes blinked slowly. "And without adaptation," she left the thought unfinished. A guard approached, announcing that other diplomats requested the Queen's presence. Before leaving, Ulta turned to James one last time. "We will speak again, Ambassador. I find our conversations enlightening." She paused, then added, "Perhaps humanity's greatest achievement isn't your technology or your resilience, but your ability to embrace change without fear." As James watched her leave, he couldn't shake the feeling that this meeting would change everything. He didn't know then how right he was, or that within months, the fate of 2 species would rest on what had started this night. The stars twinkled overhead, unchanging and eternal, much like the Empire itself. But as James studied the diplomatic briefings late into the night, he realized that change was coming, whether the Empire wanted it or not. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage, and nothing would ever be the same. What he couldn't know was that Queen Ulta had already set in motion events that would shake the foundations of both their civilizations. As she returned to her ship that night, she was already planning the next phase of what would become the most ambitious project in the Empire's history, one that would begin with the human ambassador who had captured her attention in ways she hadn't thought possible. 3 months after the first contact ball, James found himself on the Empire's capital world. Celestia. The planet's triple suns cast ever-changing shadows across crystal spires that stretched into the purple sky. As Earth's newly appointed ambassador, he had his own quarters in the diplomatic district, a transparent dome that showed the stars even during daylight. The Queen's invitation to tour the Empire's Advanced Biology Center came as a surprise. Most of the Empire's scientific facilities were off-limits to lesser species. James wore his formal diplomatic uniform, though he felt underdressed next to the Queen's shimmering, living metal dress that moved like waves in starlight. Our species once bred for perfection, Alta explained as they walked through halls lined with genetic displays. Every trait was carefully chosen, every flaw eliminated. She stopped before a hologram showing her species' DNA structure. But perfection, we discovered, has a price. James studied the complex double helix, noting how it differed from human DNA. What kind of price, Your Majesty? Alta's 4 eyes showed an emotion James had never seen in an Imperial before. Fear. We are dying, Ambassador. Not quickly, not obviously, but with each generation, our numbers decrease. Our perfect genes have become too perfect, too rigid. We cannot adapt to new diseases, new environments. The revelation stunned James. The Empire had always presented itself as the peak of evolution, looking down on other species for their primitive genetics. How long? Without intervention, our scientists estimate we have less than 10 generations left. Alta moved to another display, this one showing human DNA. But then we discovered humanity. Your genes. They're chaos itself. Imperfect, always changing, adapting. You can survive conditions that would kill us instantly. James felt a chill despite the warm air. Is that why you've been so interested in diplomatic relations? You want our genetic material? Not exactly. Alta's upper eyes narrowed, a sign of determination. We want to learn from you. Your species has something we lost long ago. The ability to evolve. Their tour continued through laboratories where Empire scientists studied samples from various species. James noticed an unusual number of human genetic displays. There's more, Alta said, leading him to a secure room. Inside, a massive screen showed birth rates across the Empire. The declining numbers were shocking. Our females can barely conceive anymore. Those who do often lose their children before birth. Our pursuit of perfection has led us to evolutionary dead end. James remembered his diplomatic training, keeping his voice neutral. Why are you showing me this? Surely the Empire wouldn't want this weakness known to other species. Because I trust you, James. It was the first time she had used his first name. And because I believe humanity might be the key to our survival. Not through conquest or force, but through cooperation. At that moment, an alarm blared through the facility. Red lights flashed as scientists rushed to a nearby laboratory. Alta moved quickly, her royal guards forming around her and James. Inside the lab, a genetic experiment glowed in its containment field. James couldn't understand the technical details on the screens, but he recognized the pattern. It was a successful merger of human and Imperial DNA. Impossible, one scientist whispered. The compatibility ratio is over 60%. Alta's expression was unreadable as she studied the results. Perhaps not so impossible. Nature finds a way, doesn't it, Ambassador? James looked between the Queen and the experiment, understanding dawning. You're not just studying us. You're trying to create hybrids. We are trying to survive, Alta corrected. And perhaps in doing so, we can create something greater than either of our species alone. As they left the facility, James felt the weight of what he'd learned. The mighty Empire, masters of 1,000 worlds, was secretly desperate for humanity's help. But Alta's last words echoed in his mind, making him wonder if there was more to her interest than mere scientific curiosity. What he didn't know was that the successful experiment he'd witnessed would soon lead to an announcement that would shake the foundations of both their civilizations. The secret laboratory deep beneath the Imperial Palace hummed with activity. Queen Alta stood before a row of genetic incubators, her 4 eyes fixed on the swirling patterns of DNA displayed on the screens. Behind her, James paced nervously, still processing what she had just told him. "You want to use my genetic material?" he asked, his voice echoing in the secure chamber. "Isn't that against every law the Empire has about genetic purity?" Alta turned to face him, her silvery skin reflecting the blue light from the machines. "The laws were made to protect us. Now they're killing us." She moved to a central display, bringing up images of failed Imperial embryos. "In the past month alone, we've lost 200 potential children across the Empire. Our birth rates are falling faster than our worst predictions." James stopped pacing, studying the data. Over the past 6 months, he'd become more than just Earth's ambassador. Alta had brought him into her inner circle, sharing secrets that could shake the Empire to its foundations. Their frequent meetings had sparked rumors in the Imperial court, but no one dared question their queen's choices openly. "What makes you think I'm compatible?" he asked. "There must be millions of humans with better genetic profiles." Alta's upper eyes showed amusement while her lower ones remained serious, an expression James had learned meant she knew something he didn't. "We've been testing compatibility markers for months. Your genetic structure shows a 78% adaptation potential with Imperial DNA. It's the highest we've ever seen." The revelation hit James like a physical blow. "The diplomatic meetings, the cultural exchanges. You were screening us all along." "Yes," Alta admitted without shame. "But finding you was unexpected. Your genetic profile is unique, resilient yet adaptable, strong yet flexible. Perfect for what we need." A scientist entered the chamber, carrying a data crystal. She bowed to Alta before speaking. "The latest simulations are complete, Your Majesty. The probability of success has increased to 64%. James watched as Alta studied the new data, her expression unreadable to most but not to him. He'd learned to read the subtle shifts in her eyes, the way her luminescent skin changed patterns with her emotions. Right now, she was both excited and afraid. "Show me," she commanded. The scientist activated a holographic display in the center of the room. It showed a double helix slowly combining with Imperial DNA, forming a stable new pattern. The simulation predicted viable offspring with enhanced abilities, adaptive healing from humans, enhanced intelligence from the Empire, and physical capabilities beyond either species. "If this works," Alta said softly, "it could save my people, but it would change everything we are, everything we've been for 10,000 years." James stepped closer to the display. "Change isn't always bad. You taught me that the Empire's greatest flaw was refusing to evolve." Their eyes met across the hologram, and something unspoken passed between them. Over the months, their relationship had grown beyond diplomatic necessity into something neither of them had expected, a genuine connection between two very different beings. "There's something else," Alta said, dismissing the scientist with a gesture. "When they were alone," she continued, "the procedure would be more likely to succeed with direct genetic transfer. No artificial combining of DNA in a lab." James took a moment to understand her meaning. When he did, his eyes widened. "You mean?" "Yes." Alta's skin rippled with patterns of nervous energy. "I would carry the child myself. Our scientists believe my royal bloodline makes me the ideal candidate. The child would be heir to both our species' legacies." The implications were staggering. A human imperial hybrid, born to the Queen herself, would change the power dynamics of the entire galaxy. It would also put both of them in terrible danger from those who wanted to keep the Empire pure. "When?" James asked, knowing they had passed the point of no return. "Tonight," Alta replied. "The genetic window is perfect, and we've prepared everything." "But James," she moved closer, towering over him, yet somehow seeming vulnerable. "This isn't just about saving my species anymore. I chose you for more than your genetics." As security systems hummed around them and stars wheeled overhead, Two beings from vastly different worlds prepared to make history in ways neither of them could fully predict. The Grand Council Chamber of the Stellar Empire was packed with representatives from 1,000 worlds. The annual Galactic Assembly had drawn diplomats from every corner of known space, all gathered to discuss trade agreements, border disputes, and the ever-expanding influence of humanity. James stood among the Earth delegation, trying to maintain his diplomatic composure. It had been 2 months since that night in the secret laboratory, and he hadn't seen Alta privately since then. Palace rumors spoke of the Queen's mysterious illness, her absence from public functions explained away by diplomatic duties. The chamber's crystalline dome reflected the light of 3 suns, casting rainbow patterns across the assembled diplomats. Empire nobles wore their ceremonial armor. Other species displayed their own formal wear, and humans stood out in their simple but elegant uniforms. "The Queen approaches," announced the Imperial Herald, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. Alta entered, and a collective gasp rippled through the assembly. She wore her traditional royal garments, but there was something different about her. Her silvery skin had a new luminescence, and her movements were more deliberate than usual. James felt his heart race as he noticed subtle changes that only someone who knew her well would recognize. "Honored representatives," Alta began, her voice carrying effortlessly across the chamber. "Today marks a turning point in the history of the Stellar Empire, and indeed, of all our civilizations." The chamber fell silent. Even the usually chattering hive-mind delegates stopped their constant communication. For 10,000 years, we have prided ourselves on our genetic purity. We have looked down upon those we considered lesser beings. Her 4 eyes swept the chamber, lingering briefly on James. But pride comes before a fall, and our fall has been happening in silence for generations. Murmurs of confusion spread through the assembly. Empire nobles shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "Our population is dying. Our perfect genes have become our prison, leaving us unable to adapt, unable to survive the very changes we created in our galaxy." Alta's voice grew stronger. "But where we saw weakness in others, we should have seen strength. Where we saw impurity, we should have seen hope." She stepped forward, her ceremonial robes flowing around her. "I stand before you carrying the future of not just the Empire, but of all our species. I am with child." The chamber erupted in cheers from the Empire delegates, but Alta raised her hand for silence. "The child I carry is not purely imperial." The cheers died instantly. A heavy silence fell over the chamber. "The father of my child is human." Alta's eyes found James in the crowd. "Ambassador James Anderson of Earth has given our people the greatest gift possible, a future." Chaos erupted. Empire nobles shouted in outrage. Other species delegates broke into frenzied discussions. The human delegation stared at James in shock. "Silence." Alta's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "This child represents everything we could become. Human adaptability combined with imperial strength. A bridge between our civilizations. Proof that we are stronger together than apart." James stood still, feeling thousands of eyes on him. He kept his gaze locked with Alta's, offering what support he could across the distance. "Those who oppose this union oppose the survival of our species," Alta continued. "The child I carry is the first of a new generation. Through this union, the Empire will survive, adapt, and grow stronger than ever before." An elderly imperial noble stood up, his voice shaking with rage. "This is abomination. You have betrayed everything we are." "No," Alta replied calmly. "I have saved everything we can become." She placed a hand on her midsection, where James knew their child was growing. "The law is clear. My child will be heir to the imperial throne. Any who challenge this challenge the foundations of our civilization itself." As the chamber dissolved into argument and debate, James saw Alta's subtle nod to him. They had prepared for this moment, but the real challenges were just beginning. Their child would either unite the galaxy or tear it apart, and there would be no middle ground. The future of 2 civilizations now grew within the Queen of the Stars, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same. Chaos reigned in the aftermath of Queen Alta's announcement. The Imperial Palace buzzed with activity as nobles stormed through crystal corridors, demanding answers. On Earth, emergency council meetings stretched into their third day as global leaders struggled to respond to the revelation. James found himself confined to a secure wing of the palace, watched by both loyal Imperial guards and human security teams. Through his window, he could see protesters gathering in the capital's streets below. Some carried signs supporting the Queen's choice, while others demanded her removal from the throne. "The Earth government is calling it treason," his aide reported, reading from a secure transmission. "They're saying you acted without authority, endangered diplomatic relations, and violated at least 15 international protocols." James watched a group of Imperial priests marching past his window, their ceremonial robes billowing. And what are they saying about the child? Every genetics lab on Earth wants samples. The military's interested in the strategic implications. Religious leaders are debating whether the child has a soul. The aide paused. "Sir, they're sending an extraction team to bring you home." Before James could respond, the door slid open. Alta entered, dismissing all guards with a gesture. Her pregnancy was more visible now, her silvery skin glowing with an inner light that made her look almost ethereal. "The Imperial Council is divided," she said without preamble. "Half support us, seeing the child as salvation. The others," she touched her abdomen protectively, "they want to declare the pregnancy void and remove me from power." James moved to her side, noticing how her guards tensed, but didn't interfere. "Can they do that?" "They can try." Alta's upper eyes showed determination, while her lower ones revealed worry. "But there's something else. The medical readings. Our child is developing faster than expected. He shows signs of both species' strengths, but none of their weaknesses." A distant explosion rocked the palace, making the crystal walls hum. Security alarms blared as guards rushed past the door. "The traditionalists are making their move," Alta said, her voice hardening. "They would rather destroy everything than see the empire change." James activated his diplomatic communicator. "We need to get you somewhere safe. My ship is still in the diplomatic bay." We cooled. "I will not run." Alta drew herself up to her full height, every inch the Queen. "This is exactly what they want. To paint me as a weak ruler who abandoned her people for an alien lover." Another explosion, closer this time. The palace's defensive shields hummed to life, casting a purple glow through the windows. "Your Majesty." A commander of Alta's personal guard burst in. "Rebel forces have breached the outer defenses. They're being led by High General Rist." James felt his heart sink. Rist had been one of the most vocal opponents of human-imperial relations from the start. "How many?" "Enough to take the palace," the commander admitted. "But we have a surprise for them. The Human Embassy Security Force is requesting permission to assist in palace defense. They're saying it's their duty to protect the father of the Queen's child." Alta's skin patterns shifted in surprise. "Earth ordered them to bring you home." "They did," James smiled. "But it seems even human soldiers can choose honor over orders." The Queen's personal communicator chimed. A holoscreen appeared, showing massive ships descending through the atmosphere. Earth's diplomatic fleet, armed and ready. "Message from Earth Command," the commander reported. They say that while they don't approve of how this happened, they won't allow harm to come to Earth's first hybrid royal child. They're demanding the rebels stand down." James watched as Alta processed this information, her four eyes showing a complex mix of emotions. Their child, not yet born, was already changing the relationship between their species. "Very well," Alta said, her voice carrying the weight of command. "Let us show these rebels what happens when they face the combined might of humanity and the Empire." As battle stations sounded throughout the palace and troops moved into position, James realized that their child represented more than just the future of two species. It represented hope, hope that different peoples could come together, that change could overcome tradition, and that love could bridge the gaps between the stars themselves. The battle for their future was about to begin. The Imperial Palace shook with explosions as rebel forces clashed with the combined human and loyal Imperial defenders. Energy weapons lit up the night sky, casting multicolored shadows through the crystal walls. Queen Alta stood in the palace's central command center, her pregnancy now clearly visible beneath her battle armor. High General Rist's forces have breached the eastern perimeter, reported a human tactical officer. But our Earth Marines are holding them at the inner courtyard. James watched the tactical displays, noting how human and Imperial troops worked together despite never having trained jointly. The rebels had expected to face only loyal Imperial forces, not the combined might of two species fighting as one. They're advancing toward the genetic research wing, Alta observed, her 4 eyes tracking multiple screens at once. Rist knows that's where we keep the hybrid development data. A massive explosion rocked the palace's foundations. Emergency lights flashed as damage reports flooded in. "My queen," the Imperial Defense Minister called out, "the rebels have deployed sonic disruptors. They're trying to collapse the palace's crystal structure." James noticed Alta's hand move protectively to her abdomen. The sonic weapons could harm their unborn child. Before he could speak, she made her decision. "Activate Protocol Omega," she commanded. Authorization. Queen Alta. Royal blood. Line unbroken. The chamber fell silent as hidden panels opened in the walls. Mechanical sounds filled the air as ancient defense systems, unused for thousands of years, came to life. "The first Queen's Guardians," Alta explained to James. "War machines from the Empire's founding, programmed to protect the royal bloodline at all costs. They will recognize our child as royal blood." Massive robotic forms emerged from the walls, their crystalline bodies glowing with internal power. They moved with fluid grace despite their size, taking up defensive positions around the command center. "Your Majesty," a communication officer interrupted. "Message from the rebel lines. General Rist demands to speak with you." Alta nodded, and a holographic image of Rist appeared in the center of the room. The general's ceremonial armor was scared from battle. "This madness ends now, Alta," Rist snarled. "Surrender the human and terminate the abomination you carry, or we will bring down 10,000 years of imperial rule." James stepped forward, but Alta's hand on his arm stopped him. Her voice rang with authority as she addressed her former general. "You speak of maintaining imperial rule while violating its most sacred laws," she said. "The first Queen's writings are clear. The Empire must adapt or die. I choose adaptation." "Then die you shall." Rist raised his weapon. The hologram vanished as another series of explosions rocked the palace. But this time, something was different. The rebels' sonic weapons suddenly went silent. "Earth Fleet has jammed their disruptors," the tactical officer reported with a grin. "And our ground forces have their position surrounded." Through the command center's windows, James watched as the ancient Guardian machines engaged the rebel forces. Their crystalline bodies absorbed energy weapons while their own weapons cut through rebel defenses like they were paper. "My queen," the Imperial Defense Minister called out, "the rebel lines are breaking." They didn't expect. They couldn't have known about the Guardians. Alta's skin patterns shifted in what James now recognized as satisfaction. The first Queen built her Guardians to protect the Empire's future. Today, they protect a future she could never have imagined, but one she would have understood. Suddenly, Alta gasped, her hand pressing against her abdomen. James rushed to her side as her skin patterns rippled with unexpected intensity. "The child," she whispered. "It's responding to the Guardians. I can feel. It's connected to them somehow." The ancient machines paused in their attack, their crystalline forms pulsing in sync with Alta's skin patterns. The entire palace seemed to hum with energy. "Impossible," the defense minister breathed. "The Guardians are acknowledging the child as their true master." As rebel forces surrendered across the palace grounds, James held Alta steady, understanding that their child was already changing the empire in ways no one could have predicted. The old giving way to the new, tradition blending with change, two species becoming something greater than either could be alone. The battle was ending, but their revolution was just beginning. The Imperial birthing chamber glowed with soft light as medical teams from both Earth and the Empire worked together. Outside, the three suns of the capital world were setting, casting long shadows across the crowds gathered to await news of their future ruler's birth. James paced nervously while Alta lay on the crystalline medical bed, her silvery skin pulsing with patterns he'd never seen before. The ancient guardian machines stood watch, their crystalline bodies resonating with the same patterns as their queen. "The child's vital signs are unprecedented," reported the head Imperial physician, studying readings that combine both human and Imperial medical data. "The genetic merger is beyond anything we predicted." Alta's 4 eyes found James. "Come closer," she whispered. When he took her hand, the guardian machines shifted, recognizing the connection between them. "Final phase beginning," announced the human doctor. "The child is ready." The chamber filled with a soft humming as both species' medical technologies worked in harmony. James watched in awe as Alta's skin began to glow brighter, the patterns of light spreading throughout the room. "Something's happening with the Guardians," called out a security officer. The ancient machines had begun to pulse in rhythm with Alta's heartbeat, their crystalline forms casting rainbow lights across the walls. With a final surge of energy that made the palace's crystal structures sing, the child was born. The room fell silent as everyone stared at the miracle before them. The baby had Alta's silvery skin, but it shifted and changed like flowing mercury. 2 eyes opened, human in shape, but with the deep purple color of the Empire. When the child moved, its skin rippled with patterns of light that made the guardian machines hum in response. "Perfect," Alta breathed, her 4 eyes glowing with joy. "Both of us, yet something entirely new." The head physician ran his scanner over the child. "Incredible. Human adaptive abilities combined with Imperial strength, the ability to survive in almost any environment. And something else." He paused, checking his readings again. "The child appears to be interfacing with our technology naturally, just like the Guardians." James gently touched his child's hand, and the baby gripped his finger with surprising strength. The nearby guardian machine leaned closer, its crystalline surface reflecting the child's skin patterns. "The first queen's prophecy," whispered an elderly Imperial priest who had been quietly observing. "When the stars align and blood mingles, the true heir shall command both flesh and crystal, bridging the gap between what was and what shall be." Alta smiled weakly. "Our people needed to change, to adapt. Through this child, we will learn to do both." The baby made a soft sound, and all the crystal surfaces in the room resonated in harmony. The guardian machines moved in perfect sync with the child's movements. "A new age begins today," Alta announced, her voice gaining strength. "Let it be recorded that on this day, we welcome not just a new heir, but a new way forward. Neither fully human nor fully Imperial, but something greater than both." James watched as their child was prepared for its first public presentation. Already, the news was spreading across the galaxy. Earth had sent official recognition of the birth, accepting the child as a symbol of permanent alliance between their civilizations. The massive doors of the palace balcony opened, revealing the crowds below. Humans and Imperials stood together, their old prejudices forgotten in this moment of shared wonder. Alta rose, cradling their child, with James at her side. As they stepped onto the balcony, the guardian machines formed an honor guard around them. The setting suns painted the sky in colors that matched the shifting patterns of the baby's skin. "Behold," Alta's voice carried across the assembly, "the future of both our peoples." The crowd erupted in cheers as the child raised its tiny hands, making all the crystal spires of the capital city glow in response. James and Alta shared a look of pure joy, knowing that their love had created something that would change the galaxy forever. High above, Stars began appearing in the darkening sky. The same stars that had once seemed to separate their species now watched over the beginning of a new civilization, born from the best of both worlds, reaching for a future limited only by imagination. The revolution was complete. The real journey was just beginning.